March, this is our first meeting in March, is actually play. And which, of course, anyone who knows me knows, that is my favorite thing to talk about is, really the joy of being. That's where I gravitate towards and what I gravitate from, really. But with so much going on for me personally, and I've talked on Facebook a little bit about, you can see some clips and some prayers, just some little moments of what's been going on for me personally. The weekly topic title was Playing Twister with God. It was this idea of playing a game with God. But, for me, there's been so much going on. I recognize the sadness. I recognize the anxiety when I hear about and read about the war in the Ukraine. And of course, because of that, we're reminded that there are more than 70 aggressions and wars and skirmishes and things going on in the planet that it's heartbreaking, and it cracks our hearts open, hopefully. And rather than retracting into that grief and that sorrow, when we allow the grief and the sorrow to come forth, we actually can see more, feel more. So today's title is Living in Between the Laughter and the Tears, or life, actually, in between the laughter and the tears. But what we're going to explore is that it's all, as that reading pointed out, that quote pointed to, is that it's all God. It's all God happening, the laughter and the tears and everything in between. In the Declaration of Principles, Ernest Holmes wrote, "We believe that heaven is within us and that we experience heaven to the degree that we become conscious of it." So when we become aware of this unity consciousness of our oneness and our wholeness, we experience the kingdom of heaven that Jesus often spoke about. He sometimes called it the kingdom of God, and he reminded us that it is within. It is not somewhere we go. It's not out there. It is within. And he said often, it is right now, in this moment. The kingdom of heaven is who we are and nothing that we do. It's who we are. And in that quote above, in the quote, that we believe heaven is within us and we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it, it almost sounds like that when we're conscious of the kingdom of heaven, when we're conscious of the truth of our being, that we wouldn't experience anxiety or lack, or see a world that is not working for everyone, that we won't see a world in strife because we're told we're going to be experiencing the kingdom of heaven. And that doesn't sound like the kingdom of heaven to me, right? So we won't see a community that is out of harmony, or a family member that is angry or upset or diseased, or of course, seeing that in ourselves. But notice that Ernest Holmes reminded me that we would experience heaven. And Jesus reminded us that heaven is within. So it doesn't matter what is going on outside of us. There are hurricanes, literal ones when you live in Florida, and figurative ones, such as the war in the Ukraine, that is a Category 5. And incredibly destructive. So knowing the kingdom of heaven, being conscious of it, being aware of it, does not prevent disharmony in the world outside of us. It is what we call disharmony, I should say, in the world outside of us. And it allows us to feel and to know peace, love, and joy, even while those things are going on in our family in our community and even in the world. And we'll talk about this. I want you guys, if you have any questions, write them down, because this is where we dialogue in a few minutes. Ernest Holmes said, "We believe that the ultimate goal of life is complete freedom from all discord of any nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all." So when we attain, it's an interesting word, the consciousness of the kingdom of heaven, the unity consciousness, or the enlightened consciousness, we will not feel within us disharmony with the disharmonious things that we might see out there. He is really stating an ultimate reality that all people, he says, will attain this level of harmony at some point, because the truth is, that is the truth of our being right now. That's who and what we are, our essential nature, regardless of how someone is acting, as destructive as it is, that person too is the child of God, is whole, perfect, and complete right now, here and now. So we can agree with Ernest Holmes completely in our knowing of this. No matter how that truth is veiled in pain, in anger, in anxiety, in all of those things that we would not say necessarily off the top of our head would be good or would be God. But when we go beyond good and bad and right and wrong, we remember that it's all God. There's only God. You know, as I said recently, I've spoken of that heaviness that I've been feeling, you know, the vicarious anxiety for the peoples of the Ukraine and in the other wars and aggressions and that are happening around the globe. Because I am empathetic to our oneness and wholeness, right? Because I can experience that there is only one. So I experience tears and pain and grief for what my brothers and sisters are going through in the relative world, in the world of effects. And at the same time, interesting, right? At the same time, the truth of my being, my true nature, my God self, can experience love and peace and joy. In this case, the joy actually comes from knowing that regardless of what I see, regardless of the experience of my brothers and sisters are having in time and space, I know the truth that they are free in God, the expressions of God, the children of God, and that we are all one. So when I experience love, there is love for them to experience. And when they experience pain and sorrow, there is pain and sorrow and grief for me to experience. We are in harmony. We are one. Jesus said, whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me, to the one. It is only right that we feel and sense it, but it is only true that we remember who we are in it. Because the truth behind all of it is God's infinite being, our infinite oneness. So it's our task really to recognize that we're connected in the divine, as the divine all the time. And when we get caught up in the world of effects, in the world of time and space, we remember to take a moment to turn within, to connect with the truth of our being, that eternal now. Stand in the kingdom of heaven. That is peace and love. And from there, we allow our humanity to bring the laughter and the tears. But we remember that we're not limited by the tears or the grief. We don't allow it to define us. And even the laughter, we don't insist, I have to be joyful, I have to be happy. We don't insist on that. We don't allow that to define us. Instead, we allow the truth of our being, our universal nature, love and joy and peace to remind us of who we are as we experience love and connection that we have as human beings, and the most unbearable loss that we can have as human beings. Some of you know that my son was very sick for a while, and he was experiencing a lot of mental and emotional illness. He was in a lot of pain, and as his parent, you know, it was really hard for me to watch my child be in so much pain. And of course, I felt, you know, his sadness and his disconnection. And I felt my own heaviness, my own grief at the time. There was a lot of issues and problems with doctors and insurance. It was so tedious, you know, there were so many dead ends. I was trying to get help for him and trying to understand what was happening in that relative world of effects. And it was years. You know, he went through this for a few years, but during those years, there was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of joy as well. And you might think with something so heavy, how could you find laughter? How can you find joy? But that becomes the miracle and the mystery of life living itself in between the laughter and the tears. It's always there for us. Peace is always right where we are. As we experience every moment, we become more adept at going through that moment into the next and into the next, rather than holding on or pushing away. Every moment that I had that was sadness, you know, it was all that I could do to move through it, and whatever I was called to do that task. Right? If I was guided to do something, to do it and move through it. And then whatever the next moment was, which might be walking the dog and watching him chase a crab on the beach, and that would make me laugh. You know, or with the waves lapping over my feet made me smile, or my son working on a puzzle and just cracking ourselves up in a random moment of joy. So we're constantly reminded in these practices and principles to return to this moment now, because right where we are is the kingdom of heaven. And to remember the truth of our being, which is power and strength. And you know, I'm talking about the power of God, not the strength of our will, but the power of God itself. And remember that we are love. The love of God itself, and that this love can handle the laughter and the tears, the love and the loss, the joy and the pain. And so whatever we're experiencing individually or collectively as families or as a community or as a nation, whatever in the world we are going through, standing in that truth of our being, you know, allows us to reveal the kingdom of heaven within. We just want to reveal what is all, excuse me, what has always been there. So I do differ from Ernest Holmes in saying that we attain something or that we get something. It's not actually true. We reveal who and what we are, what we have always been. And sometimes we're in the midst of a pain that we think will break us. But when our heart is open, when we stand in the strength and the power of God and love, and that sword comes right at us like it is going to annihilate us, it hits us in the heart, and instead we are shattered into a billion light pieces that is dispersed as everything and everyone, and we are connected. That's the power of pain being transformed into love. And I hope that this reminds us all that it is all God. As painful and as joyful as anything ever is in our life, it is all God. And there is always an opportunity to realize, which is to make real in our life the love and the peace and the joy that is always right where we are. So we can affirm this week, I am whole in the divine. In between the laughter and the tears, the kingdom of heaven is always right where I am, in the laughter, in the tears, and in everything in between.